Chapter 1. The Incoming Sandstorm. The desert stretched before Pikachu like an endless sea of golden sand, the heat shimmering in waves across the landscape. Pikachu squinted at the distant horizon, where a small oasis waited, its promise of shade and water almost calling to him. He had been traveling for hours under the relentless sun, and the thought of reaching that cool shelter was all that kept him moving. But as he took another step forward, Pikachu felt the ground tremble beneath him, and a low, ominous rumble filled the air. Turning around, he saw a massive sandstorm brewing on the horizon. Dark clouds of dust and sand swirling upward, rising higher and higher until they blotted out the sky. The storm was like a living beast, moving fast, and Pikachu's heart pounded as he realized he was directly in its path. There was no time to waste. Pikachu knew he couldn't outrun the storm on foot. Glancing toward the oasis, he calculated that he had a slim chance of making it if he ran as fast as he could. With a determined spark in his eye, Pikachu dug his paws into the sand and took off, sprinting towards safety. But the desert wasn't going to make it easy for him. The wind picked up, whipping sand across his path and blurring his vision. Pikachu fought to keep his eyes open, his breath coming in short gasps as the storm crept closer and closer. The oasis seemed farther away with every step, but Pikachu wasn't about to give up. He pushed himself harder, running with all the strength he had, hoping he could reach shelter before the storm swallowed him whole. Chapter 2. Fighting the Sand. The sandstorm drew nearer, roaring like a furious beast. Pikachu could feel the air growing thick with grit, each gust throwing sharp grains of sand against his face. Squinting through the dust, he could just barely make out the oasis ahead. A cluster of palm trees waving in the hot wind, their shadows stretching like fingers across the sand. But as Pikachu sprinted forward, his path was suddenly blocked by a sinkhole that had appeared out of nowhere, its edges crumbling into a dark pit. He skidded to a halt, teetering on the edge as the ground gave way beneath his paws. Thinking quickly, Pikachu jumped back, his heart pounding as he carefully edged around the pit, trying to keep his balance on the unstable ground. Just as he cleared the sinkhole, he felt another tremor beneath him, to his left. The ground began shifting, and before he knew it, he was surrounded by a group of Sandylay, their eyes gleaming as they emerged from the sand. They had been stirred by the storm, and now they viewed Pikachu as an intruder in their territory. With a fierce growl, they started circling him, blocking his path forward. Pikachu's fur bristled, and he narrowed his eyes, realizing he had no choice but to stand his ground. As the Sandil lunged, Pikachu unleashed a thundershock, sparks flying as the bolt of electricity shot through the air. The Sandil recoiled, startled by the sudden attack, and Pikachu seized the moment to slip past them, dashing toward the oasis. But the storm was now upon him, its powerful winds kicking up a blinding cloud of sand that blocked out the sun. Pikachu could barely see a few steps ahead, and every breath felt like swallowing fire. He pushed forward, stumbling as the wind battered him, his paws sinking into the soft sand with each step. He was exhausted, but he knew he was close. He could almost feel the shade of the oasis ahead, almost smell the fresh water waiting just beyond the wall of sand. Chapter 3. Finding Shelter. Just when Pikachu thought he couldn't take another step, he spotted a flicker of green through the storm, a lone palm tree bending against the force of the wind. With a final burst of energy, Pikachu surged forward, making his way to the shelter of the oasis. The trees loomed larger as he approached, their wide leaves blocking some of the sand, and Pikachu felt a surge of relief as he finally stepped beneath their shade. Collapsing beside a small pool of water, Pikachu took a deep breath, grateful for the momentary reprieve from the storm. But he knew he wasn't out of danger yet. The sandstorm was still raging, and the wind howled around him, shaking the trees and sending sand whipping through the branches. Pikachu looked around, searching for a more secure place to wait out the storm. His eyes fell on a large rock formation on the far side of the oasis, partially buried in the sand. It formed a shallow cave just big enough to shield him from the worst of the storm. Pikachu forced himself back up, feeling the weight of exhaustion in his limbs, and trudged over to the rock shelter. As he huddled inside, the wind whipped outside, rattling the branches and sending bursts of sand across the oasis. Hours passed as the storm raged on, the wind howling and the sand creating an endless whirl outside. Pikachu huddled close to the rock, feeling its cool surface against his fur, and waited, hoping that the storm would pass soon. As he listened to the storm's fury, he thought about the journey he'd just made, marveling at how close he'd come to being lost in the desert. He was grateful for every step that had led him to this small oasis of safety. Finally, the howling began to fade, and the wind settled into a low, steady whisper. Pikachu poked his head out of the rock shelter, squinting against the brightness as the sun broke through the clouds of sand. The desert was quiet once more, and the air was calm, the storm having passed. Pikachu stepped out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on his face and the cool breeze that now drifted across the desert sands. As he looked back at the oasis, Pikachu felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced the storm's fury and emerged victorious, guided by his courage and determination. With a smile, Pikachu took one last drink from the oasis's pool, refreshed and ready to continue his journey, knowing he had conquered the desert and its fiercest challenge.